Imagine you're living in medieval Europe. You've been feeling anxious. You hear voices sometimes. You can't sleep. You cry for no reason. Today, a doctor would diagnose you with depression, anxiety, or maybe schizophrenia. They'd give you medication, therapy, support. But in medieval Europe, they'd say the devil is inside you, and what they did next would haunt your nightmares. This is what happened to people who were considered crazy in the Middle Ages. And I promise you, the reality is worse than anything you've imagined. First, let's understand something important. In medieval Europe, there was no concept of mental illness. None. The word didn't exist. The idea that your brain could malfunction the same way your leg could break was completely unknown. Instead, people had two explanations for unusual behavior. Explanation number one, God is testing you. If you were wealthy or well-connected, your strange behavior might be seen as a divine trial, a test of faith. People would pray for you. Monks would care for you. You might even be considered holy. Explanation number two, the devil has entered your body. And if you were poor, uneducated, or a woman, this was almost always the diagnosis. Not depression, not anxiety, demonic possession. And once that label was on you, your life was essentially over. So what behaviors would get you labeled as possessed by the devil? The list is terrifying because it includes things that millions of people experience today. Talking to yourself, hearing voices, epileptic seizures which involve uncontrollable shaking and loss of consciousness, severe mood swings, refusing to eat, laughing or crying at inappropriate times, sleepwalking, having nightmares. Even left-handedness was considered suspicious in some regions. Women had it far worse. A woman who was too intelligent, too outspoken, too independent, or too beautiful could be accused of being a witch, which was essentially the female version of demonic possession. Postpartum depression, which affects roughly 1 in 7 new mothers today, was almost always interpreted as the devil taking over a woman's mind after childbirth. The diagnosis process itself was horrifying. There were no brain scans, no psychological evaluations. Instead, a priest or a self-proclaimed exorcist would perform a series of tests. They would hold a crucifix in front of your face. If you looked away, you were possessed. They would read Bible passages at you. If you screamed, cried, or showed any emotional reaction, that was the devil responding. They would sprinkle holy water on you. If your skin turned red from the reaction, the devil was burning inside you. The problem is obvious. A person having a panic attack would scream when someone shouts Bible verses at them. A person with a skin condition would turn red when water is thrown on them. Every test was designed to confirm what they already believed. It was a system built to find guilt, not truth. Once you were officially diagnosed as possessed, the first treatment was exorcism. And medieval exorcisms were nothing like what you see in movies. The process could last days, sometimes weeks. You would be tied to a chair or a bed. A priest would stand over you, reading prayers for hours and hours without stopping. You were not allowed to eat, drink, or sleep during the process. The idea was to starve the demon out of your body. If prayers didn't work, they escalated. They would force you to swallow disgusting mixtures designed to make the demon uncomfortable inside your body. These included pigeon droppings mixed with wine, ground up insects, rotten eggs, salt water until you vomited repeatedly. The logic was simple. If your body became unpleasant enough, the demon would want to leave. Some exorcists used physical pain. They believed that hurting the body would hurt the demon inside, so they would beat the patient, burn them with hot irons, submerge them in freezing water, pull out their fingernails, all while praying and commanding the devil to leave. And here's the most disturbing part. The families of these patients often watched. They believed this was medicine. They believed the priest was saving their loved one. A mother would watch her daughter being beaten and thank God that the demon was being driven out. If the patients survived the exorcism and their behavior returned to normal, which sometimes happened because the trauma itself caused them to suppress their symptoms, they were declared cured. If they died during the process, the church would say the demon killed them before it could be expelled. The exorcist was never blamed. The system was designed so that it could never fail. If you lived, God saved you. If you died, the devil killed you. But exorcism wasn't even the worst treatment. That honor goes to trepanation. Trepanation is the practice of drilling a hole in someone's skull, and it was performed for centuries as a treatment for mental illness. The theory was straightforward. If evil spirits are trapped inside your head, you need to create an exit, a hole. So medieval surgeons who had no anesthesia, no sterile tools, and no understanding of brain anatomy would take a hand drill or a sharp blade and bore through the patient's skull while they were fully conscious. Archaeological evidence shows that many patients actually survived the procedure. We know this because their skulls show signs of bone healing around the hole, meaning they lived long enough for the bone to start regrowing. But surviving trepanation didn't mean recovering. Many patients suffered brain infections, permanent brain damage, or lived the rest of their lives in worse condition than before. Other treatments were equally creative and equally horrifying. Bloodletting was common. Doctors believed that mental illness was caused by an imbalance of the four humors, the bodily fluids they thought controlled health. If you were mad, you had too much blood, so they would cut your veins and drain it out. Some patients lost so much blood they passed out or died. There was also the practice of forced isolation. Patients deemed dangerous or hopeless would be locked in small rooms, cellars, or even cages, sometimes for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Families who couldn't control a mentally ill relative would chain them to walls in their own homes. There are records of people found chained in basements, covered in their own waste, who had been there for over a decade. And if you had no family to take you in, you were sent to wander. Medieval towns would simply cast mentally ill people out of the city gates. They became wanderers, beggars, or they simply died of exposure. Some towns actually put them on boats called ships of fools and sent them down the river to become someone else's problem. And then there was the witch connection. Starting in the 1400s, mental illness and witchcraft became deeply intertwined. The Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1487, was essentially a handbook for identifying and prosecuting witches, and its descriptions of witchcraft read like a modern psychiatry textbook. Witches talk to invisible beings. That sounds like hallucinations. Witches have unpredictable moods and violent outbursts. That sounds like bipolar disorder. Witches can't feel pain when pricked with needles. That sounds like dissociative disorder. Witches have uncontrollable body movements. That sounds like Tourette's syndrome or epilepsy. Historians estimate that between 40,000 and 100,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Europe between the 1400s and 1700s. And modern researchers believe that a significant percentage of those victims were simply people suffering from mental illness. They were burned alive, hanged, drowned, crushed with stones. There was a specific test called the swimming test, or trial by water. the accused person was tied up and thrown into a river. If they sank, they were innocent. But of course, they might drown. If they floated, it proved the water was rejecting them because of their evil nature, and they would be pulled out and executed. Either way, you lost. The truly heartbreaking part is that many of these people knew something was wrong with them. They were scared, they wanted help, but the only help available was an exorcist with a hot iron, a surgeon with a skull drill, or a town square with a pile of wood and a rope. The first real turning point came in 1247, when the Bethlehem Royal Hospital in London became one of the first institutions dedicated to housing the mentally ill. But don't imagine a modern hospital. Early Bethlehem, which locals nicknamed Bedlam, was essentially a prison. Patients were chained, starved, and for centuries, members of the public could actually pay a small fee to come and watch the patients, like visiting a human zoo. Entertainment. It wasn't until the late 1700s that a French doctor named Philippe Pinel literally unchained the patients at the Bicêtre Hospital in Paris. He argued that mentally ill people were sick, not possessed, and that they deserved treatment, not punishment. People thought he was insane for doing this. And it wasn't until the 1950s that the first effective psychiatric medications were developed, giving doctors real tools to treat conditions like schizophrenia, depression, and bipolar disorder. That's less than 75 years ago. Think about that. For roughly 1,500 years, from the fall of Rome to the mid-20th century, humanity's primary response to mental illness was punishment, torture, and death. We drilled holes in skulls. We burned people alive. We chained them in basements, all because we didn't understand that the brain, like any other organ, can get sick. The next time someone tells you that mental health awareness is unnecessary, or that people should just toughen up, remember this. We are only 2 generations removed from a world where hearing voices meant having a hole drilled in your skull without anesthesia. We've come far, but we're not done yet. If this video opened your eyes, subscribe to MarkerMinds. We explain science and history with simple drawings every week. And if you want to know why you wouldn't survive medieval Europe in general, watch this video right here. See you in the next one.